Good afternoon, and welcome to today's presentation of Change Agents, Leaders Tackling Health, Technology, Art, and Activism. I am Regina Taylor, and I have created, in partnership with SMU, the Black Album mixtape in response to the historical significance of 2020, defined by COVID-19 and social protest. The Black Album mixtape invites students, professionals, and the community in the arts, technology, science, and activism to submit original content until May 3rd, 2021. Works can include video, music, audio, images, monologues, photos, designs, text, interviews, self-interviews to recognize and celebrate the talent and work of collaborators. The Black Album Mixtape and I will offer 8 cash awards in a virtual block party on May 11th, 2021. While you're here, a special conversation between leaders in the areas of health, technology, art, and activism. This presentation will last about 40 minutes with another 10 minutes allotted for questions. As you listen in, feel free to type any questions for our speakers into the Q&A feature below. The chat feature will be used for updates and announcements by our team throughout the program. I'm pleased now to introduce our speakers. Louis Carr, the president of media sales at BET Networks, through partnerships with corporations like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, McDonald's, General Motors, Facebook, and Apple. He has been a guide on opportunities within Black and Brown communities. Carr also founded the Louis Carr Internship Foundation and the Blueprint Men's Summit. Xavier Hernandez is the principal owner who oversees the day-to-day growth of BTEC Studios, Project 1021, Classroom 2 Table, and XD Technology Industry. He brings 25 years of business experience in managing Fortune 500 companies, creating and overseeing training projects, talent acquisition, grant writing, sales growth, and expansion. Dr. Ian Smith is a New York Times #1 best-selling author, the solo host of the Emmy Award-winning television show, The Doctors, and a longtime media contributor to the Emmy Award-winning Rachel Ray Show. He also founded the National Health Initiative, the 50 Million Pound Challenge, and the Makeover Mile. Today's moderator, Troy Osborne Pryor, is a producer, host, and actor. His collaborations have led to projects with ABC, Warner Brothers, True TV, HGTV, and DIY Network. Troy is an advocate for connecting undiscovered diverse talent to mainstream media platforms through his production network, Creative Cipher, and under his chief company, Pryor Holdings. I'm delighted to welcome our panelists and to invite Mr. Pryor to lead today's discussion.
Always great to see you all. And Dr. Smith, great to meet you as well. So we're going to jump right into the conversation today. Again, thank you all for joining us. This past year has been a very emotionally challenging time. I'm going to start with Mr. Carr, just getting an understanding of how you cope with all of the things that went on in these past few months within the pandemic and also the social unrest that we saw.
Thank you, Troy, first for having me. I appreciate being on such an esteemed panel. I've been saying that the last year was most like Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, the worst of times and the best of times. The worst of times because of the pandemic of COVID-19 and also racial injustice across our country. The best of times because it woke us all up. It woke us up about our health. It woke us up about racial injustices. And now it's up to us to do something different as we sort of move forward. So it is time for action now as we are in 21. And I'm sure a lot of our panelists, like Dr. N, will tell us what type of action we can take in regards to improving our health, improving our businesses. And I think that this is a great opportunity for us to discuss and educate all of our viewers today.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that response, Dr. Ian. I'm going to kick it over to you, just getting a better understanding of how you cope with everything that was going on these past few months.
First of all, thank you for having me on the panel. I really appreciate it. It's good to see my neighbor, Louis Carr, who I don't get to see in the hood, but I can at least see him here. We're both very busy, but I want to say that this has been a very, very interesting year for me personally, and obviously for the world. I mean, when this started back in March of last year, I was very early on Instagram trying to explain to people how serious this was and how major this could become if we didn't adhere to some really basic healthcare guidelines about protecting ourselves. Unfortunately, uh, people with my voice were either diminished or few in number. And so here we are over a year later, 500 and almost 70,000 Americans in the ground. Cases still 60,000 a day of new infections, people trying to kidnap sitting governors because they don't want to wear masks. So it's really been a mess. It was bungled from the beginning. It's been bungled in the middle, and it's really still bungled now. We got J&J, their vaccine now, which was, to add to Pfizer and Moderna, now possibly associated with blood clots. They threw away 15 million doses 2 weeks ago because of manufacturing error. It's just been a mess at the local level and at the federal level. So for me, my message to people is to use common sense, to think about the health and well-being of your family, and to make real smart decisions as you move forward. In these times, which are very perilous, you can never be overcautious. So you can imagine, it disheartens me when governors are removing mask mandates, when African Americans are not willing to take the vaccine by as much as 60% less, when our neighborhoods are not offered facilities that are given the life-saving vaccines. It's all a big mess right now. And I think that, as Lewis said, this has been, the best of times and the worst of times. And I think, with the social injustice and the awareness of social injustice and racial inequities highlighted during this past time in the middle of a pandemic, it's been really kind of a cataclysmic environment. And I think that we have to march forward by first looking at our health, by second, think through things, use common sense, don't give into the internet hyperbole and viral shenanigans. And lastly, believe that we're going to get through this, but we got to do it together.
Thank you so much for that response. And Mr. Hernandez, a similar question to you. Over the past couple of months, this has been a very challenging time. How have you coped with everything that has transpired?
Absolutely. Well, it's an honor to be here on the show with Louis Carr and Dr. Smith. How do you follow up with that, right? No, it's been extremely challenging, obviously, not only for the African American, the unserved communities, but the Latino community, right? Who tend not to really already have this taboo about not listening to government, and how do we follow protocol when it comes to concerns with COVID-19? It has been extremely difficult, not only from the injustice that's currently happening, as you well know, just in Chicago over the last 2 weeks, it's been very traumatic for those in Latino communities, with the incident of the murder of Adam Toledo, and now followed, obviously, COVID still very heavily with the numbers rising again in underserved communities. The way we've been really coping with it is still continue to advocate for the health. We work a lot with K through 8 in underserved communities. So we'd like to focus on really advising how to prepare yourself, how in both languages, right? Sometimes the messages can sway back and forth, but to continue to stay positive and the importance of emotional wellness.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Smith, one of the things that things that really stood out to me of what you just mentioned was this idea of individuals such as yourself who may have been muted in some way, shape, or form, or their communication has not gotten out. We're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, ownership. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation about who owns that media, who owns that message, who gets the word out. Can you speak a little bit more about just the importance of individuals that have a platform using that platform especially in today's society?
Absolutely. Now more than ever, we need to see more diverse people, people of color, on all types of platforms, particularly the major platforms. And we need to listen. Let me give you this example. We need to see African Americans and Latinos on platforms, not just entertaining. We need to see lawyers and sociologists and educators and doctors and scientists and engineers going on major platforms and being the experts that are giving advice. And the problem has been for years, and I have to be honest, I've been able to break through that bottleneck, and I've been on all the major shows, but there's more than Dr. Ian. There are many more great doctors and health advocates and educators who don't get a chance. There's a show right now, and I'm not going to mention the show, but there's a show right now that is a main show that is helmed by an African American, that the executive producer is an African American. And I have been told by people who have tried to book African American guests on this show that African American experts are not welcome. This particular show said, do not pitch us your Black clients. We are not just a Black show. Pitch us your white clients. This is a show, once again, that is helmed by an African American. The host is African American. The executive producer is African American. And yet they're telling publicists, don't pitch us your Black clients, pitch us your white clients, because we don't want to look like a Black show. That to me encapsulates the problem that we're having. If our own brothers and sisters don't put us on the platforms that they are in charge of, then how can we get a seat at the table of those platforms that we are not in charge of? This is a problem. This is a big problem. And I'm calling this show out because at some point, you have to stand up for what's right and you have to mention what's wrong. And this show is doing a disservice to all of us because it's not allowing people to say, well, how do you get African Americans to be more confident about the vaccine? Well, if you can't get Black and brown people on TV and major platforms discussing the science and the positivity of these vaccines, then who are they going to believe? And so it's a big problem. And, you know, we talk about racial inequity and racial injustice. It's just not police and law enforcement. It's in every sector. It's in hospitals, it's in law firms, it's in Hollywood, and it's in media. And this is a major problem. I'm speaking about it because I was so upset yesterday when I found out about this show, not willing to bring on experts or not willing to talk about the issue of African-American women who are dying at higher rates in hospitals, you know, for reasons we don't understand. And the show doesn't want to cover a story like that. Well, who's going to cover that story? So this is a major issue.
I appreciate that. And you brought up some more, excellent points. And when we talk about who's in the executive rooms, who actually moves the media, who allows those communications to become manifest and move forward, I can't think of a better person to segue my next question to. Is smiling, Mr. Lewis Carr, when we're talking about true power in media. You sit at the top of that. What are your thoughts on ways in which institutions can continue to provide platforms so there are equitable opportunities for people of color? You've created so many opportunities for so many individuals. Can you speak to some of the things that you have done and things that we should do as a media entity?
Well, to Dr. N's point, about a year ago, the 1st of June to be exact, right after the death of George Floyd, I sent out an email to peers and colleagues in the industry, and the title of that email was Be Courageous. I think it is up to people like myself and those of us who are in corporate America to be courageous right now, to speak our truth, to understand the value that our communities have, and to really consistently and intentionally speak about the opportunities that exist there. I gave a speech last week, said I have one of the best jobs on the planet because I get to every single day go around and tell corporations and tell the industry how great Black people are. You know, as the world says something different, I get to give them real facts and history and understanding and tell the story. We just came up with a new slogan, Best in Black. A lot of times, to Dr. N's point, a lot of us want to be what they call crossover. They don't want to be sort of pigeonholed. And the reason I tell them, I said, because you don't understand how big Black is. I mean, our marketplace spending over $1.3 trillion a year. And when you add Black and brown together, you're talking about $2.5 trillion in spending a year. So people sometimes they want to look in other countries, they want to look at markets that are declining versus growing because they don't understand where the real opportunity lies. So I think it's to us, people like myself, people like Dr. N, Mr. Hernandez, to really speak our truth and educate people and inspire people and motivate people about the real opportunities that exist in our particular marketplace. And it's up to us to educate our own people. Mm-hmm. I think that's sort of where we sort of sometimes drop off. We're just not educated on the facts. And, you know, I have one of those jobs that does that. That's why it's just one of the best jobs on the planet. And I think we have to intentionally make a great effort to sort of make sure whether it's on-air talent, whether it's producers, whether it is executives in the corporate suite, to really talk about the real opportunities that exist. We've been working, Dr. N, with the CDC on programs to sort of educate our communities about this vaccine and to sort of give them comfort. And the first thing I tell them, you need people, Black and brown people, in the creative to tell the message. Mm-hmm. I mean, you need that authenticity, you need that transparency so that it's important, it's believable to them, because we know there's some history that's not so good that gives our communities doubt. So we've got to make an extra effort. We've got to be more intentional than anybody else out there, because we know how important it is for our communities in regards to health, in regards to overall education, in regards to opportunities.
Thank you so much for that. And just speaking of opportunities, so often we are unaware of the various economic opportunities that may be available, jobs that may be available in media. Oftentimes, especially with some of the projects I work on with youth, they're always looking at oftentimes the individual in front of the camera and not realizing just how much power is behind that camera and sway that those individuals have to dictate what goes in front of the camera. And obviously those who control that media or that message control the way we see each other, the way we view each other, the way we treat one another. And it's vitally important to have representation in front so individuals can see that. Mr. Hernandez, passing it over to you. I'd like to get a little bit more insight on some of the programs that you all are doing in the community there to provide more equitable opportunities as well.
Absolutely. You know, when you look at either our company's bio or myself, you just think, well, it's maybe very heavy business related, but there comes a point in time where you can't really grow your community and through either workforce development or economic development if you don't have the pipeline. So what we decided to do is create a STEM, STEAM, and E-STEAM. E-STEAM standing now for entrepreneurship and emotional wellness, which I'm sure Dr. Smith can really tap on the emotional circumstances that we go through in our communities. But what we've done is we're now focusing and taking actually a plan from Steve Jobs, where after he had lost Apple the first time around, he said, we're going to go back. We're going to start training the youth. And that's what we decided to do, focusing within our underserved communities by teaching them STEM, STEAM, and E-STEAM. Because of the pandemic, we were doing coding, but we focused on health. If we're not healthy enough to get to school, we are not healthy enough to learn. So a lot of the things that we're implementing with our Classroom to Table program, which is we're teaching kids about fruits, vegetables, sustainability, how to grow our own food, the elimination of food deserts in our community. I mean, when you think about food in itself, these are the very simple little things that in America we struggle with to provide nutritious meals to our children, and yet we expect them to perform and at an elite level. So I'd love to hear, folks on the panel and those with the Q&A, because the answer doesn't only just rely with us experts. This really takes a whole community, from the CEO to a macro level to folks in the day-to-day, because we have to be able to build these pipelines of this new generational workforce, whether it's in tech, whether it's in science, education, or building our future community leaders.
And thanks for that. And I love this panel, because you all are making it so easy to glide into the next the next question, going over to Dr. Smith. One of the things that Xavier just mentioned, which is very powerful, about our diet and the way that we treat this vessel that we have here. So what are some of the things that you feel that communities of color can do to combat diets that may have been a part of our tradition, but may not be in our best interest long term?
Well, Mr. Hernandez is just right on point. I mean, first of all, it starts with education and acknowledgement. We, people of color, African Americans and Latinos, we historically have not had the healthiest of diets. It's just it's a cultural thing. I grew up, with grandparents from the deep South. And when I look at the nutritional value as I'm older, it obviously tasted great. But as I look at it now, the nutritional value of what we primarily ate, it wasn't the healthiest of foods. And I think that we have to acknowledge, it's not that we are putting down our heritage by saying the foods are unhealthy. It's saying, okay, let's look at this as objectively as possible and realize that we tend not to fuel our bodies as best as we can. Now, what can we do going forward to improve it? It doesn't mean that you totally eradicate and get rid of some of the things that you've enjoyed, in your cultural cuisines. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, though, you have to open your palate and open your mind. So first, start by educating people about what a whole grain is, why fruits and vegetables are important beyond your mother and father saying you need to eat them. We need to explain to people, what is it that fruits and vegetables contain that makes it so much healthier than a Pop-Tart? Why is it that we need to stop eating flaming hots? We need to explain processed ingredients and how those processed ingredients are affecting our hormonal system. It's so interesting that so many studies over the years have looked at the nutritional impact on communities of color versus communities not of color. And a lot of the differences that you see, not only in health, but also in aptitude, scholastic educational attainment, better test scores, better attendance rate, less distraction during school. A lot of this can be traced back to nutrition. A lot of people of color, children of color, not getting a solid breakfast in the morning, some getting no breakfast in the morning. At lunchtime, a lot of students going out, particularly in Chicago, I'll never forget the story about that, going out and getting these big iced teas and flaming hots. These kinds of things are the things that not by themselves are causing problems, but in the aggregate, it causes problems. And habits that are formed when you're young become the way you live as you get older. And so we have to re-educate our people. We have to remove the idea of food deserts. It is nonsense and absolutely ridiculous that you can go into some neighborhoods, urban environments, and can't find real grocery stores that are providing healthy and affordable. That's key. It's also got to be affordable foods. And we also need to learn about sustainability. So these are things that we need to tackle. Mr. Hernandez is right, but it's going to take thousands of Mr. Hernandezes around the country in different communities doing it. It's not going to take one person. The three of us on this panel can't solve all the problems. We need others who have similar drive and determination and mission. And that's how you start tackling this problem from a national standpoint.
And so it would be safe to say, Dr. Ian, that when we're talking about education, we're also talking about the educational system and certain things that we can say are lacking in that model. There are traditional things that we've been taught for years. We can get into, what's lacking as far as history, but there are also very practical things, to your point, that are not really taught in those school systems. What are some of the things that you think that these educational programs can implement at an early age?
There needs to be a course on nutrition, and not just when you get a chance to go to college or high school. You need to teach kids about food and nutrition, and it can be done at a level that they can understand and relate to. And let me tell you something, when young kids learn about doing things healthier, whether it's nutrition or getting tests or exercising, you know what they do? They bring that back home to the family. And my children do it all the time. My children do it with carbon footprints. They say, Dad, you shouldn't be doing this because, you know, you're adding to the carbon footprint of the world. So kids are great emissaries for information. They can bring that information from schools into the families, and you can see a whole dynamic where there's familial change around certain issues, but the schools have to offer that. So yes, math and science are important. I get it. I was a math and science person. History is important, but you also got to teach some of the basics that kids and families need to be able not just to survive, but to thrive. And hopefully more educational systems throughout the country, local systems, will start implementing some of these very useful strategies and information that can be transformative right away.
Thank you for that. And you know what I'm hearing is leadership, setting an example, creating legacy, and switching gears just a little bit, going over to Mr. Carr. What I am compartmentalizing all of that in is that we need more way makers. We need way makers, and I believe that that term holds a special place in your heart. So I just want to hear a little bit about what you feel that Waymaker is, and tell us about what you have going on with Waymaker.
Thank you, Troy, for that. Great setup for me to give a pitch. As you know, I launched this brand back in January called Waymaker. And I did it for primarily two reasons. Number one, it was sort of for me paying down a debt to the 19 Waymakers, and I know they're 19 because I went back in history and counted 19 individuals that intentionally had impact on my life and my career when I didn't even know that I needed intervention. So this is sort of my payback by paying it forward in regards to other people who probably were like me some 30, 40 years ago. Second reason is I believe that the more information, the more education, the more inspiration you give people to live their best life in order to change their families and their communities, the better that our country will be. So what I do is sort of highlight career paths and individuals who've not only been through something, but who've come through something and made it to the other side. People who grew up poor, got an education, and did some things that sort of made it happen for them. But I asked each one of them, who was that waymaker in their life that made it possible? Because, you know, we always hear, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, but who gave you the boots?
That's good.
I mean, if you had to pull yourself up, somebody had to give you the boots.
That's right.
So we want to talk about the importance of each and one of us being a waymaker. You know, what Mr. Hernandez is doing with his project and what Dr. N is doing with his medical education, they're being waymakers for people. So we want to continue to talk about how important for each of us to be a waymaker. I started my foundation as a way to be a waymaker, to be able to bring young kids in and talk to them about what to do and what not to do if they are looking to work in corporate America. I started the Blueprint Summit in a way to basically sort of gather men together in a safe place to talk about health, to talk about finances, to talk about entrepreneurship, to talk about relationships, all in order so that we can live our best life. That in turn improve our families, our communities, and our country. So waymakerjournal.com.
All right, thanks for that. And you know, the other key word that I'm hearing out of this is having an impact. And for those out there listening, you know, you're not listening to individuals that are only giving you theory, that are only giving you something that was read. These are individuals that are actually having an impact and executing on those things that they are preaching. And so I'm going to go around starting with Mr. Hernandez. Tell us your definition of impact today.
You know, it's funny because I feel like at times the more that you think you're gaining ground, I feel like the less I begin to know, right? Because it's so complex. For me, it really came down after this, really the start of the pandemic was obviously not to go back to the health, but taking care of your vessel, right? And giving back to my community. And so now my mind shift and the company's mind shift has gone from powering to empowering, right? And one of the things that I think that we as change makers and way makers, right, is that not only just starting at an early age, but also focusing on our seniors. A lot of our seniors tend to be lost in the shuffle, right? Because those are the folks that hold the most wisdom. They've been through a lot. They've seen a lot of the generational shifts, and sometimes they see great strides, and then they seem to see lower strides where maybe not much has changed. So for us, the impact has really gone to bringing all communities together, not just from K through 8, but also now involving seniors into our livelihood. Very similar to when I did my studies out in Europe, I realized that seniors were heavily, the heads of the tribes were very involved with the community. And that's something I think that we, as change makers and way makers, we have to also bring them part to that conversation in our communities.
And Dr. Ian, following up on that question, when we look at diets and health plans and coaching sessions and all of the things of that nature, ultimately we're looking for results at some point in time. And so would love to hear your definition of true impact.
Yeah. Well, I'm all about results. And people say, what do I do for a living? I transform people's lives. I mean, this is I have to argue with my good friend Lewis, and I think I got the best job because, my job every day when I get up is to try to change at least one life, because I know that life, if it's changed, it can change other lives. And so for me, I get a chance to really, as Mr. Hernandez says, not just power, but to empower people. There's a difference there. I like to empower people to make them realize not only are you great, not only can you do it, but this is something that is your destiny that you can control. So I do all kinds of things. First of all, for example, my new book is called Fast Burn, which is a 9-week program. The results are amazing, 15 to 17 pounds in 9 weeks, lots of food, tasty, affordable. But see, I write my programs from the viewpoint of the user. So I write it with people say, I need something affordable. It's got to taste good. It's got to be easy. That's what Fast Burn is. But this is what I do for people. I say, listen, let's do a challenge together. So on Facebook, I have Fast Burn Challenge. We got 6,000 people in 4 days who've joined. And starting Monday, I'm going to walk them through for free, day by day, these 9 weeks to help them change their lives. I do the same thing on Instagram. My Instagram is at Dr. Ian Smith, spell the doctor out, I-A-N Smith. What I try to do with like Lewis says, I've been blessed to have been successful, and people have made sacrifices for me, and I'm trying to pay it forward also. So I try to do things in my expertise that can change lives, whether it's on social media, whether it's on television, whether it's on Facebook. And this is how we have to do it. And let me just say this too, by the way, Troy. Lewis also said something else that really strikes a chord with me. He says you got to have courage. We have to have courage as Latinos and African Americans to stand up for what is right, but to also call out what is wrong. This is the greatest moment in my life that I've ever seen where we have a chance to make a difference. People are listening to us, and it's okay to stand up and say, this is not right. And that's why in the beginning of this panel, I'm calling out that TV show, and I hope someone from that show listens. You can't have a show that has a Black host and a Black executive producer, and then not have Black experts come on and talk about various issues, not just about Black issues, but issues in general. Because see, let me explain something to you, how the media works. When you have an African American or a Latino sitting on a mainstream show around the country, and you have young boys and girls who may happen to walk by that television set and see someone who looks like them or talks like them on that show, even if they don't understand what they're saying, something goes off in that little boy or girl's head that says, hey, I can make it there also. So when you deprive African Americans and Latinos a seat on those platforms, what you're actually doing is you're possibly not encouraging young people to be able to see that image like I saw as a kid sometimes, to strive for those things. So we have to stand up and be courageous and call people out and call situations out in all sectors of the country, in all situations, because that's the only way we're going to bring about real change.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Carr, following up with you, the true definition in your from your perspective of impact, you've impacted so many individuals, even with doing some of the research on your internship programs and the jobs that you have created for so many individuals. You've truly made an impact. But my question is, and this will be good for those who are listening. Was there a point in time, or if there was, what was it like when you realized that you had the true value in the room to be courageous enough to speak up on a certain a matter as it relates to media, things of that nature?
Well, Troy, I was like a lot of people. When I graduated from college, I started sort of searching for, what's my purpose? What's my passion? We all hear the commencement speeches of people telling, find your passion and then you'll find your purpose. Well, I was a slow student, all right? So it took me a number of years to sort of come to that realization that what I was doing was my purpose and my passion. I started at BET some 35 years ago. I didn't find my purpose and my passion until 10 years in, as I was looking at every opportunity, looking to go someplace else to work. And one day I was sitting in my office looking out the window, and I realized that I had this great opportunity to hire Black and brown people and put them in a position and point them in a direction that could change their families forever, forever. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm like, this is my purpose. And that became my passion, to scale that opportunity. And, thank God I've been able to do that. But it's the intentionality to change someone's life for the better. And whether that is through education, whether that's through health, whether that's through opportunities, it is that intentionality to be able to say, I'm gonna look at you and then give you an opportunity or educate you or inspire you or motivate you to change you forever. And I think that's what real impact is. When you look back and say, I remember when you weren't that person that you are today.
And as we prepare for Q&A from our audience, I want to follow up with you, Mr. Carr, on that. What was that feeling like, whether it was the first person or the 20th person that said, you know what, Mr. Carr, you were a waymaker? What did that feel like when that individual approached you with that?
It's an amazing joy. I always tell people, when you see athletics teams, whether they're the Lakers or whether they're Tampa Bay, and everybody's cheering and crying, people always kind of get confused. Like, what is that? It is having a goal and objective and then achieving it. If you have goals and objectives for people in your life, one of the things I say, if I'm not making the people who work for me great, then I'm not doing my job. And sometimes in doing that, it's a rough road. It's tough to sort of look at somebody and tell them you're greater than what you think. As someone told me one day. That's hard. When you look at somebody and say you're greater than, people look and go like, who, me? Why do you say that? And going through that process and having people live up to their greatness. Because I do believe that there's a greatness within all of us. We just need waymakers and people to help us find it and to bring it out of us. And I think you've got two individuals on this panel, Mr. Hernandez and Dr. N, who are doing that. They're seeing the greatness in individuals and say, I'm going to intentionally do something that will impact you to bring out your greatness.
And thank you for that. And now moving over to some of the questions from our audience. We have a question, and it says, what do you think certain individuals of various cultural groups, or why do you think certain individuals of various cultural groups are reluctant to getting the vaccine, and how that will continue to affect that particular group of people? I'm going to direct this toward Dr. Ian.
Yeah, this is very clear. The healthcare system in America and the government have had a really poor history with African Americans as far as treating us fairly. You go back to Tuskegee, everyone talks about that experiment with the syphilis experiment back in 1932, where these men were infected with syphilis and weren't told they had syphilis and weren't given treatment to help them. And the government allowed them to go through the course of the disease to see how syphilis would progress in human beings. That was barbaric. And so we know these things. And therefore, our mistrust in the healthcare establishment and community is very real and very well deserved. Now, that being said, we also know that we need more Black doctors. Studies have consistently showed that Black doctors, that Black patients do better under the care of Black physicians. That is not to say that white doctors can't do well with Black patients, but Black doctors, and same with Latino doctors, when you speak the same language, when you come from the same culture, when you understand things that are unspoken, right? When you grow up a certain way and you can relate a certain way, that means a lot in the hospital. Vaccine hesitancy among people of color is real and it's well founded, but we have to reverse that because this vaccine is the only way out. African American and Latinos, they're dying 3 times higher from COVID, but they're getting the vaccine 3 times less. And so we had to change those. Those are bad numbers for us because if you don't survive COVID, you're going to die. And so we need to have more people of influence and people, regular people, getting up and encourage our brothers and sisters to take the vaccine. We got to get the shot in the arm. It's important. It's life-saving. And if we don't do it, by the way, I'm going to end by this. If we don't get enough people vaccinated fast enough, what's going to happen is a variant strain is going to emerge that is going to completely make our current vaccinations useless. And we're going to have to get booster shots. So we have to go through this all over again and get new surges. So we have to get vaccinations in people's arms, and we need to make sure that people understand what these vaccines are.
Appreciate that. And that is a daunting perspective to think that we can go through this cycle over and over and over again. It becomes rather frustrating to know that there are solutions and things that we can do. But if we're not doing them as a whole, we go through a vicious cycle. Now, we're talking about our physical health in this respect, but there's a huge mental health component related to much of what we discussed today, whether it was the pandemic or whether or the inequities as well. So with everything that's gone on, it's been a tough and long time. I'm going to start with Dr. Ian, go to Mr. Hernandez afterwards. What are some of the first steps you think people can do towards healing emotionally, mentally, as well as physically?
First of all, you have to acknowledge that you're stressed. There's a stigma in our communities of color that we're stressed or we're depressed or we're sad. And because we think that it's not macho, we have to acknowledge that we're having a difficult time. That's number one, by the way. When you look at the mental health statistics for our communities, they are off the charts. But then when you look at the number of us going to seek help, whether it's therapy or seeing a medical doctor, the numbers are too low. So first of all is acknowledging that you're having a problem and then going to seek help. The other thing I tell people all the time is this is a great time to find yourself. Honestly, I know it sounds cliche, but this is a time to really reflect on who you are and what you really want out of life. And it's also time to reflect about what truly makes you happy. Maybe going to Gucci or Louis Vuitton and spending $2,000 that took you, 2 months to save to buy a material good. Maybe that's not really what's making you happy. Maybe there are other things in life that make you happy. And it's different for all of us, but finding true happiness amidst this chaos that we're in right now is what's going to get people through. I mean, I've learned a lot about myself, and I thought I knew myself very well, but I learned a lot about what really matters to me, sitting in quarantine and not doing the things I was used to doing. So I'm hoping that people will, number one, acknowledge that they're stressed. Number two, ask for help. Talk to people if you are. And number three, find things that make you happy that you can control. Don't allow external validation or external factors control what really makes you happy in life. You have to find it and you have to control it. And that's how you control your destiny.
I appreciate that. And it just reminds me of something my late grandmother used to, tell us. And for individuals that are always busy on the go, go, go. And, I would get the thought to slow down. And it feels as though these are those opportunities to take that time to prioritize our lives and what makes the most sense for us to be a part of, where we should spend our energy and how we can be most productive. Mr. Carr, you brought up, some amazing points about making an impact, being a waymaker, and change. And for those that are listening, how do you prioritize, or some of the, or I should say, what are some of the things you do to help prioritize so that you stay on pace with your purpose?
Really is think about others. I have been thinking about the situation in Virginia with the Lieutenant Nazario. That image and that disrespect has affected thousands of young Black and brown young men. Thousands. We talk about this angry Black and brown young people. They're just angry about everything. To see the disrespect that someone who's serving the country, who was so respectful and calm and patient, to see that, it bothered me. It bothered me. What do you think it has done for young people? What do you think it has done for young men in the military who are 19, 20, and 21 years old? It has taken so much out of them. So I think we have to reach out to people like that. And are you okay? You can talk to me about anything. Are you okay? Are you mad like me? Are you pissed like me? Let's talk about that. I think we have to be intentional in doing that, because sometimes it's so pent up in them because they don't think nobody will understand their anger, their disappointment. So we've got to be proactive and reach out to people when we know it's affecting them. Because if it's affecting us, it's clearly affecting these young people in our communities who are struggling every day with multiple challenges. So I think we've got to be much more intentional and much more proactive. And for me, that's what makes it better for me, by saying, don't focus so much on the issues that I have. Let me focus on the issues that can really make a difference for somebody else and somebody else's family and community.
And Mr. Hernandez, you are doing just that with so many youth in the CPS system, the different program that you're a part of. We are coming to a close shortly, but I would love to hear your perspective on how you're helping a lot of these young adults, especially those in Chicago, dealing with a lot of this emotional um, these emotional I'm missing my words right now, losing the word right now.
Turmoil,
Yeah,
conflict.
this emotional
Yes.
turmoil that it's going on right now. How are you coping with that?
Well, first off, Mr. Carr and Dr. Smith, I'm taking on the challenge. So I'm not quite sure how many participants are on this telecast today, but I would love to purchase 50 books from Mr. Smith to donate. And I'm sure there's a way where we can figure that out off air. But taking on that first step, I'm enlightened today by being with these both gentlemen. And only if Mr. Smith would autograph the first book, I'm willing to donate the rest of the 49.
So Mr. Hernandez, I'm going to match you, and I'm going to buy 50 books from Dr.
There we
Smith,
go.
and you can distribute those 50 books. So now he has 100 that he has to autograph. All right.
I love it. I love it. And that's how change starts. And in answering your question, Troy, that's the change that we're looking for, right? When we talk about technology, I know it was part of the panel, and I'll keep it very brief. It's amazing the disparities that ownership in technology we have in Black and brown, women of color, and women in general. It's amazing when you talk to a lot of the youth and you tell them that they want to be future scientists or they want to be engineers, and they say their dream is to work at Google and Facebook, and so be it. But how many of them are really saying, I want to own or be a partner with Google or be a subcontractor? They can't even begin to understand that facet of the business. And I think to be a change maker, we have to start training our youth to say, no, if I'm equal enough to work for you, I'm equal enough to be your partner. Because after all, you know, Mr. Carr mentioned about the trillions of dollars that goes into us supplying everything from retail to fashion to the movie industry, you name it, all facets of it. Technology has their grip. If anything that taught us about the pandemic, who would have knew that Zoom would have been the front runner, right? I'm sure there were some smart people behind closed doors, but we won't get into that, right? The shift of power, we won't get into that. That's for a different conversation. But I think we have to start changing the mindset. And that mindset starts with folks in the community and women in general, that we need to have ownership in this technology. Right now, we're having the fastest separation of wealth, faster than the Industrial Revolution. And yet it's silent and we don't see it. So the inclusion in technology has to be, if there's going to be any generational wealth within our community. Being an NBA star and being a rapper, I understand that. It takes a hard journey. But those that are in technology, you're talking about autonomous wealth, where you can own 5 or 6 different autonomous companies and still have the opportunity to spend time with your family versus having a 9-to-5 or working for a technology firm is going to allow you to only, you're working, it says you're working 40, but you're really working 60. And again, with zero emotional time for your children. So I think that it's time for us to start educating our youth about ownership in tech.
I want to thank you all so much for the words of wisdom today. We are going to allot, I believe, a brief moment for some parting words for those that are listening to us out there. Once again, I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity to moderate this conversation. I've learned a lot. I'm humbled to be a part of it. Thank you, Ms. Taylor, for allowing me to moderate. And with that being said, I'm going to pass the mic over to Ms. Regina Taylor.
I am so grateful to all of you. You are sharing with us your brilliant minds, your amazing hearts, your fierce advocacy in this conversation today, which is incredible, in talking about what is essential, things that are going on in our lives, and you are touching those who are listening and inspiring people to keep moving on. I thank each and every one of you. Troy, thank you, Mr. Carr. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez, Mr. Smith. I have enjoyed this conversation so much. If you found yourself inspired by today's conversation and this project, please consider submitting a piece of original work for adding to the mixtape. Details will be forthcoming via email. And meantime, take care, be safe, and be well.